we have this belief that every perceived problem is an opportunity waiting to be revealed. It's like a gift wrapped in thorns. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at life through that lens, like the example you just gave, what you really want from your partner is the honest, authentic reflection of yourself through the eyes of another. We don't think we want pain. We don't think we want challenges. We don't think we want issues. But that's really there's maybe a different perspective, a different lens on that. And so if you look at life when something comes up, I just had a conversation this morning with somebody where it was a financial conversation. It was a big deal. Mm. And when things don't go our way, we often say, okay, what is the universe trying to teach us? Uh-huh. What are we meant to learn from this? What is the wisdom in this lack?
Hello, my name is Azrya Bequer, and I am the co-founding steward of BEQOMING, which is a platform that is devoted to unlocking the truth of who you are.
I'm Benjamin Bequer, and I'm also one of the co-founders of BEQOMING, and also we are co-authors of Becoming Everything You Didn't Know You Wanted.
On Ever Forward Radio today, we are going to dissect what it really means to make contact with the most profoundly powerful aspect of yourself and how to cultivate a relationship with that aspect of yourself in your daily life in a really practical way.
We talk also about how every perceived problem is an opportunity waiting to be revealed, a gift wrapped in thorns. We also talk about the journey to finding self-love. And I found a path to radical self-love through embracing and integrating the parts of myself that I didn't even know I needed to.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Ever Forward Radio. I'm here with two guests, actually. Well, two and a half. We got our K9 friend, Saren, in the studio. I'm here with B and Azrya. And what I want to kind of wrap my head around, the theme going in, is something I've heard you all talk a lot about, and that's being humble teachers and grateful students. So I know we've talked preliminarily about some concepts for the show, but when I first was wrapping my head around the book here and all of your work, just those kind of couple phrases that really stood out, I think is like the best way for me to kind of summarize the best and biggest takeaway. A lot of other things in there to kind of dissect into. But first and foremost, because I have you both here now, I want to highlight something that just really hit home for me, especially in the relationship aspect with my partner, my spouse, my wife. And it's this all-in moment that I've heard you all talk about in kind of the finding of each other. And it wasn't really a decision. It was something that just smacked the shit out of you. And when I heard you describe it, I was like, damn, it like takes me back to that moment, the night that I met her. And it was just, fuck, this is it. Like, just, there's no question. It's just all in. Am I describing it correctly? What was that moment like? And, for maybe the person who hasn't found that, how will they know that's when it is?
Yeah, I guess first of all, the choice is choice. It's interesting you brought that up. Is we have matching tattoos that are the humble teachers, grateful students.
Oh, nice, good, okay.
Yeah,
pick the right phrase then. All right, yeah.
But it is the choiceless choice, which is also the all-in moment, which is like, it's more what you said earlier about, like, you didn't really, like, there wasn't really even a question, right? It was just like, oh, this is now happening. So that's how we describe the choiceless choice, which is a paradox because you still do also have to choose it, and it's also chosen you.
Yeah, and have to fight for it sometimes.
Yeah, sure. And I guess what's interesting too is what came up for us early in the relationship. We felt that like in a deep, visceral way, like, oh shit, this is like for life. And simultaneously, the paradox that there was doubts and fears and insecurities that were coming up in those early months. And really our work with plant medicine during that time was really crucial. And every time the walls, the defenses would come up or the insecurities or the doubts, there would be a reset and we'd be like, wow, no, actually this is it. And our hearts would open. Yeah. And so we went through a little bit of
so if I would have just tried psychedelics years sooner, maybe it would have broken down a lot more.
Maybe. Yeah. Certainly, it's a powerful tool to get around your subconscious that really drives a lot of our fears and insecurities.
How would you kind of advise somebody? Because the all-in moment, the choiceless choice, but really the fears and all the insecurities and the things that come up after that. I think with such an overwhelming hell yes and overwhelming, this is my person, or at least this is someone right here, right now, there's no denying that I'm willing to commit to work with this person, for me as well. But with that, I think is the biggest realization of the level of work that we are going to be faced with. And even from personal experience, work that we don't even know exists. We think we have an idea of what it's going to take to commit to this person and how we want to show up for them and ourselves in that relationship, but we really have no idea.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
For sure. If we knew, we probably wouldn't say yes, right?
True.
We would say, I do.
Yeah.
We'd be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good over here, right? In my comfort zone.
Yeah.
There's a reason nature gives you all those pheromones and all those hormones going crazy to keep you going.
To trick you,
to keep you here. Run.
There's a really beautiful reframe on that, actually, that I feel called to share. Because what you said is kind of like, I think, the cultural narrative, you know, the honeymoon phase, that cocktail of just like feel good endorphins. And really, it's like a high, right? When you first...
flood of chemicals.
Yeah, you're falling in love and you're just like, holy shit, I feel like I'm God and you're God, and together we're God times 100,000, and like this is fucking amazing. Am I allowed to curse on your show?
Hell yeah, fuck yeah.
And yeah, and then those cocktails, that cocktail of chemicals starts to subside. And at that point we're kind of like right? We made commitments, we're starting to build a life together, and now we have to sort of confront like the quote unquote reality of who this person really is, and also all of their insecurities and weaknesses and shadows and annoying habits and, you know, baggage. And so that's kind of the cultural narrative that we have around it. And I've always had a hard time with it because my experience of that early phase was that it was real. Like it didn't feel to me like, oh, my nervous system is just being hijacked by sort of this biological thing. It feels like I'm actually having a spiritual experience that is like deeply profound, and maybe the most profound thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I don't want to write it off as like just this thing that's actually an illusion that feels really, doesn't feel like it's honoring like the depth of what I'm experiencing here.
You're welcome.
And so
sounds like something I would say.
Yeah. And so I want to share this video. I watched a video where Marianne Williamson talks about this, and she talks about really union and like divine union. And she explains it as, it's not that early phase is tricking you, or it's an illusion to kind of get you hooked. It's actually that you're tapping into the truest expression of what's actually available in this dynamic. And it's giving you a felt sense of that, not just a sense, like a visceral taste. Like this is actually through the lens of love, which is actually the truth, what's possible here. And then all of your stuff starts to creep back in, which distorts your lens. And that's actually the illusion. All the other stuff, all the judgment, all the, you know, rejection, all the self-protection, like all of that then becomes the work. And if you do the work, you can move through that and you can come back to that place of seeing someone clearly through the lens of love. And that's actually the curriculum of divine union, of, you know, conscious partnership. And the other person is just a mirror, just to reflect back to you where your real work is. And I thought that was so beautiful, and it resonated deeply because it felt more true to me than the, like I said, the cultural narrative.
I feel that immensely, because kind of the part you're talking about, and this isn't really new, I think, for not anybody in my audience, this concept of mirroring in relationships. If we have a healthy mirror, you know, we have a healthy relationship. But that also really means we're being shown constantly and very truthfully ourselves and the shit in our own life, in our own hearts, in our own minds that, you know, we really need to work on. And for me, that was really it. As you were describing it, I was just kind of having this flashback of that moment of the choiceless choice of this is it, you're my person. But simultaneously, it's like I saw the person that I wanted to be. I saw the person that I felt I always was. And I also saw the person, and still I think in some ways I'm working on that, like the person that I'm afraid of becoming because of all the hard shit that I'm gonna have to face in the process. And so I think I don't know if like that comes that often, but for me, it was just like this overwhelming sensation, realization of who I am, who I'm not, who I want to be, and all the fears in between, all living inside of this other person. So it's not only the commitment to this other person, this relationship, but like, am I also going to choose me in the process as well?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think through the reflection of others is where often we can see ourselves, and those reflections are so needed in life, whether it's your parents or your significant other. But having people that stand for your greatness and see you, certainly Azrya has been that for me, and through her reflection, I found the courage to step into the person that I really wanted to be, and so that really resonates. Yeah.
I feel you. That's beautiful. It's like it's still ongoing as well.
For sure.
It's not just like a one-stop realization. It's like, oh shit, this is a forever, forever practice. Azrya, I've heard you discuss how we have a lack of emphasis on our emotional intelligence in terms of society and education and kind of all these norms, air quote norms, in the world. And it really all boils down, my kind of interpretation here of your talk on this was, it boils down to an inability, even a disability to us all individually and as a society, to be in relationship with ourselves. And as we talk about relationships, I think that's a point I really want to drive home, is that in relationship with another person, we also are in relationship with ourselves. So how can we wrap our head around that concept, and what might we be facing, what might we be working against in these kind of like societal norms that are keeping us from either recognizing that or, actually consistently working on that?
Yeah. Yeah, our entire education system is designed around, I think, one fatal flaw, which is the assumption that human beings are cognitive beings, meaning that our mental intelligence, our rational, logical mind is actually who we are. And while we have a mind that is rational and logical and can be all those things, it's just one layer of the cake. There's a lot of other layers that are present. There's our physical intelligence, our emotional intelligence, and our spiritual intelligence. And all of those are layered together with the mental. And so if you overdevelop one, it's like going to the gym and only working your bicep. You're only going to get so far.
I've been trying for 20 years. It doesn't work. Yeah.
Your entire school system, everything is telling you, just focus on the bicep, forget everything else. And then you wonder why, you're out of breath when you're climbing stairs, and you're like, why am I out of shape? Why is life hard? Why am I weak? And so I would say that from an emotional intelligence perspective, as a collective, we are really immature. We're underdeveloped. It's not a bad, we haven't done anything wrong. We just haven't developed that aspect of us. We haven't learned how to relate to the complex terrain of our emotions in a way that is useful and meaningful. We also aren't able to therefore tap into the power of our emotions, because our emotions govern our human experience, really. Yes, we have thoughts and beliefs, and those also influence. But if you've ever tried affirmations, right, you'll know that that's not the answer by itself. It can be helpful, but it's not the answer by itself, because if I'm feeling deeply triggered or deeply unworthy and I keep telling myself, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, well, only 20% of my conscious mind is going to believe the message, and 80% of my physical, emotional body is going to be like, no, you're not. We have all this evidence of you not being worthy stored in our tissue, So how do we start to move that energy?
And we'll have no problem showing you all of it
again and again
rapid
and again.
replay at any time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not only that, the whole, if you think of our whole system as, this complex, really energy body, right? There's our physical body, and then there's our emotional body, and our mental body, and our spiritual body, and those all have, like radio stations, they all have vibrational signals that they send out into the world. And so if
we can tune in or not.
Exactly.
Skip around, right?
Yeah, and we can either be plugged into what I would say is like the source of our true power, where we are actually in charge of, more consciously in charge of all of these aspects of ourselves versus being governed unconsciously by 80% of the equation, you know? And so if 80% of us is like, no, you're not worthy. You're a complete failure. Because that's what we've been programmed to believe through whatever external circumstances. It's going to be really difficult to convince ourselves otherwise. And this is why a big passion of ours with the work we do at Becoming and all of the programs we take people through is we don't just focus on the cognitive. Yes, the cognitive is important, but we really want people to get into their body. And the way that we do that is through somatic exercises and breath work and plant medicine and various tools, because so much intelligence can be unlocked there.
That's the truth.
Yeah, I like
that's the truth.
Carl Jung quote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And I think that's at the core of it.
How many of us are probably feeling that?
All of us.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm raising my hand. I'm thinking back to like, oh, this is just what's supposed to be. This is fate. Yeah. But that's just, in a way, to your point, ignorance really of the conscious and subconscious. Like, which one are we actually allowing to be the driver here? My perspective, the last couple of years, we'll call it a global pandemic, call it legalization, decriminalization of a lot of unique things, call it a shift in consciousness. I think there has been one the last several years. What is your take on that? Do you feel like that is in favor of maybe kind of getting in a better direction, getting away from ignorance to what you were just talking about? Or is it just more confusing right now for people? Are we actually in the right direction?
It feels like there's a polarity, right, happening. There's a split. And I think that in some ways, there's certainly a level of consciousness, a movement that's happening that's very positive. And I would say equally on the other side of the fence is we're also going in a bad direction in a lot of ways. And I think the polarity, I'm very optimistic about that, I guess. I think we are, is that the bad getting worse is actually better because it needs to get worse in order for people to be
I like that.
fed up with their situation or the circumstances or for change to happen.
It needs to be that extreme in order for shit to actually change.
So it feels like in some ways it's going in both directions. There's a split happening, and I think it's beautiful, and we are where we're supposed to be right in this moment. I think I feel very optimistic about the future, and I'm also feel that it requires all of us for that optimism to see the light of day.
Yeah, like if I'm dead asleep, right, in my bed, and someone across the room gently whispers, "Hey, wake up." Am I going to wake up? Probably not. But if someone gets a little closer and they speak a little louder, maybe I'll start to kind of like move a little, and I'll be like, but then I'll kind of drift back to sleep. And if someone comes and like bangs some pots and pans next to me, it's like, yo, wake up. I'm going to sit bolt upright in my bed. And it's the same thing with...
The best analogy. That's so good.
Yeah. It's the same thing with this, call it an awakening process, right? An awakening to a different version of reality, a different relationship to self than what has been adopted or, sort of just accepted, I think, at a mainstream level. The narrative is changing. But because people are very much asleep in the current narrative, that the incentive to wake up, the intensity has to increase, right? And so for a lot of people, that looks like hitting some form of rock bottom. Not everyone has to. Some people, the gentle wake-up call will be enough, and they'll be inspired to go on their journey. Most people are going to run their head straight into the wall like several times over.
Everyone wake up. Wake up, this is your call.
And that's beautiful because, as Benjamin said, that's actually needed. It's almost like an evolutionary mechanism.
Yeah.
Think of it like an evolutionary mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of touched on it, but immediately as you began to kind of give that answer, the question that popped up in my mind was, well, if we are in an awakening, what are we awakening to? What do you think? Is it an awakening to something that a way of thinking, a higher level of consciousness, a way to just be as a society that's always been there and we've gotten away from it? Or are we in like a rewriting period of what needs to be or what we want to be?
I think the analogy you used before of the Marianne Williams example, you could blow that out to the collective. The idea that, when you first meet somebody, there's this true essence of what you're the pure love, and then there's distortion. And I think that we're awakening to the distortion. and
Okay.
a veil
Okay.
is being lifted. And in doing so, you're just you're coming closer to the true essence of who you are, which is love.
Yeah.
It's actually more of a removing than
Yeah.
an adding, right? You're sort of like
Yeah.
you're identifying these aspects of yourself when you are in the journey of becoming, and you've opted into that journey consciously, and you've said yes to it, right? Which is a choice somewhere along the path. To start to understand where am I actually, like what aspects of me are in resistance to a deeper truth of who I am. And I would argue that that deeper truth of who we are, which Benjamin would call it love, you could call it consciousness, you could call it, pure awareness, pure potential. I would argue that no matter how dark things might be for someone, how depressed someone might be, or how disconnected someone might feel, the light of everyone's spirit really is always there, even if it's like the pilot light is really, really low, and it's like almost extinguished, but it's actually always there, and it just the flame just needs some fanning. It needs to be given room and oxygen to breathe, and the oxygen that we can give that flame is our presence. It's our awareness. Really, first and foremost, bringing our presence to ourselves and to the things that we haven't been willing to feel.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And that's a journey, and that can take time. And it's a layer. It's like shedding layers of an onion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I would say the way I would answer the question of what are we awakening to, which I think is a really beautiful question. It's kind of like, in some ways, you could boil it down to separation versus connection, right? To make it really simple. And so our entire culture, our entire society is really built on the premise of separation. Separation from nature, separation from each other, separation from, the things that actually like light us up and make us happy. How many people are programmed to just do things with their lives that they actually don't want to do because they think they have to.
Unity or division, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Separation from ourselves.
and ultimately separation from ourselves. So that, let's say that's sort of like this starting point. And then if connection to ourselves, to others, to the planet, and to a higher power, whatever you want to call that, doesn't have to be religious, but just any form of higher power.
Something other than ourselves. Absolutely. Yeah.
If that's kind of like the hero's journey, then in some ways the middle point of that, or like the active component of that, is what I would say is integration. It's like you're integrating these two versions, because on the one hand, separation isn't all bad. It has a bad rap, but it's actually, we came here to be individual, to have an individualized experience.
Sometimes a little bit of space and time does everybody good.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it at the time, but yeah.
Yeah. And also for me to experience the contrast of this human life, I want the orange to taste different than the lemon, and I want the sour to be different than the sweet, and I want to feel the pain, I want to feel the pleasure. So having polarity, right? Having separation between things is not a bad thing. It's bad, or I don't even want to use the word bad, because that breeds into a whole sort of paradigm of right and wrong.
It's
and
different. Yeah.
It's unhealthy when it becomes chronic. And I think we exist in a world where it has become chronic, and it's become so chronic that we don't even see it. We don't even see the separation that is systemic. And the ripple of impact that the separation is having, I mean, even just environmentally, is now we're waking up to the reality of that in a way that is undeniable and really painful. To think about, like, what are my kids and their kids going to experience on this planet when shit really hits the fan? Like, that's the conversation we're in right now. And it's the repercussion of decisions we've made from being asleep in the dream of separation, period. And so then if reconnecting is the goal, and then so integration is kind of like the puzzle piece, because you're actually integrating these two realities. You're integrating the knowing that you are connected to everything and everyone. You are completely inseparable from the whole, and simultaneously you are individual. They coexist.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that to me, that's integration. It's like I integrate this paradox of reality in a way within myself, And I take radical responsibility for my sovereign choices as a human being, for my free will. And simultaneously, I know it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
You know?
It kind of brings me back to my first real psilocybin trip. I had the experience that literally nothing matters, but yet at the same time, I have all the power and the choice and the responsibility and the love to make meaning out of everything. Like myself, my relationship, my day, it's this coexistence of literally nothing fucking matters, but yet everything matters all at the same time.
Totally. I've had that exact same transmission for sure.
It's just like, how can such radical opposite ends of the spectrum not only like I feel and know to be true, but now it's like I don't have to, nor should I need to choose which one. It's just, okay, integrating the two of them together, like you said.
Yeah.
Paradox. We live in one big paradox.
So many paradoxes in you all's work. And I actually, I'll skip around here a little bit to a couple of questions around that. You all talk about how the secret to growth lies in the greatest paradoxes of life, kind of like what we're just talking about. You got to let go of everything to have everything. You got to let go to have it all. You think you want harmony, and I think this is a direct quote from the book. You think you want harmony in your relationships, but what you really want is an honest reflection of yourself through the eyes of another. As you know your work, absolutely. Yeah. And I know that kind of brings us back to what we're talking about in the relationships and mirroring. But yes, absolutely. Like in reading you all's book and kind of reflecting back. So again, how can I integrate someone else's perspective into my life to apply it to be true for me? I found so many truths. I would just look back into when did I grow the most, or when did I grow even just a little bit, but a growth that has stuck with me forever, or has now become a non-negotiable truth. And it's in these paradoxes. Can you kind of crack that open for us? How can we actually look at our lives and choose, I'm going to find growth in paradoxes?
Yeah, we have a few different tools that we use. One that I'll share is we have this, it's really Azrya's, is trust the triggers to teach, the 5 T's. And so we have this belief that every perceived problem is an opportunity waiting to be revealed. It's like a gift wrapped in thorns. And so if you look at life through that lens, like the example you just gave, what you really want from your partner is the honest, authentic reflection of yourself through the eyes of another. We don't think we want pain. We don't think we want challenges. We don't think we want issues. But that's really there's maybe a different perspective, a different lens on that. And so if you look at life when something comes up, I just had a conversation this morning with somebody where it was a financial conversation. It was a big deal. And when things don't go our way, we often say, okay, what is the universe trying to teach us? What are we meant to learn from this? What is the wisdom in this lack, right? I want this thing to show up. And what is the wisdom in not having that thing show up? What am I meant to learn? And so when you look at things like that, it allows you to live in that paradox in a really beautiful way and dance with it, right? Life is a big practice. And when you learn to dance with its curriculum.
To not only not be in resistance, but to dance with it.
Yeah, to dance with it and say, okay, like this thing I really wanted to happen didn't happen. And conventional wisdom would say, now it's time to be unhappy. Right. And so instead of leaning into that and saying, okay, what am I meant to learn? How can I dance with this in a way to grow through this? Right. And I think that if you look at challenges in that way, like it is challenges, problems, issues that arise are traction. And the universe is giving you those as a gift so that you can actually propel forward. And if you didn't think about a tire who just spins, if you don't have traction, you can't move forward. And without those challenges, you won't grow. And so I think that's one example of how we look at the paradox of the bad thing happening that's really a good thing, right? For example, not to go bad and good again. But
And as I was going to say, I know you've had some really strong examples, quite a few sections in the book is really a lot about your journey of, an idea that you had for your life of acting, of coaching, of, globetrotting, of all of these things. And one example stood out to me of, I think quite literally, you were like, it was like the day before you had, I think, like $12,000 due for like studio, right? Or your facility. And you just didn't know where it was going to come from. And I feel like that is such a great example. I would appreciate if you could expand on, because it's I think easier for us to kind of go, like, okay, there's a lot of traffic. I wasn't planning on it. It's going to make me late. That's like a small shitstorm example. But when we're dealing with how am I going to pay my team? How am I going to pay rent? How am I going to get food on my table? A large thing like a sustenance or a large number in such a short window as tomorrow, how can we get to that mindset there? How did you?
I mean, I certainly wouldn't have been able to pull myself out of the looping, thought patterns of holy shit, what am I going to do? Oh my God, I'm a fuck up. Like I need to frantically like take action in order to somehow,
or even just run away entirely from your problems,
run away entirely,
like a lot
right?
of us do, yeah.
Fight or flight. And so fight or flight is something that you would expect to kick in a situation like that. Again, coming back to the emotional intelligence piece, when you understand how to work with your nervous system and with your emotional body, you're no longer going to be hijacked by a fight or flight response. You're going to be able to really mindfully work with the energy that's present and choose a different experience. And so because I at that point had been training to do this again and again, and I've had a lot of moments where I literally was looking at $0 in my bank account and was like, I do not know how this is going to work. And so then, but what I always knew in those moments was, well, if I take action from this place of scarcity and fear and lack, all that's going to do is create a ripple of more of that same energy, because I continually will always get more of what I already am, right? This is a foundational belief that I integrated in the first few years of my becoming. I will always receive more of what I already am. So I have to be very, very careful from which place I take action. And instead of thinking I know what I quote unquote should do in that moment, I have to go beyond my human self and my nervous system's freak out. And I have to go into a place of knowing. I use that word a lot, knowing. To me, that's that place of connection that I was talking about earlier. And if, the separation mindset would say, I have to figure out a linear way because I'm separate from life. And so therefore, if I'm going to want to make this rent happen, I'm going to have to make it happen myself. I'm going to have to do something, right? The connection way would say, well, I'm part of a much larger intelligence of life. And there's so many things that I can't see through my limited perception. So if I give the reins to this higher power, again, whatever you want to call it, and I trust that intelligence to guide me in this moment beyond what I might think I should do, then I'm letting go of control in a massive way, which is terrifying. And again, it takes like a lot of practice. And I'm actually listening to what's actually real. And what was actually real in that moment was a good friend of mine happened to come over and was like, hey, I'm going to this event. You want to come? And everything in my logical mind was like, you should not be going to an event right now. You should be, figuring out your shit. But the deeper knowing inside of me was like, I should go to that event. And I went to that event. And at that event, we went through like a meditative journey. And at the end of that journey, we got paired up in groups. And
you met a woman.
I met this woman, and this woman was in this group, and she came up to me and she looked at me like in a very odd way. And she was like,
a knowing
with a knowing. Exactly. And she was like, I know we're meeting for the first time, but I know you're I know you. Like, I think you came to me in a dream the other night.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, tell me more. Next thing you know, she's coming to my facility, and I'm sharing with her the vision, and I'm sharing with her that what I really need is resources. And she straight up asked me, she's like, what do you need? I'm like, I need financial resources to keep this going. And I had done a lot of work at this point to even be able to say that.
To be able to admit
to actually
the
ask
real
what
issue
I needed.
at hand. Absolutely. That's a layer of work that we all need to get to first.
There was like previous versions of me that it would have been like, I don't even know how to answer that. Because I was like, no, I'm so at peace with just what is. This is what it actually is. And there's no attachment or expectation, but you asked. So what I need is support. And 24 hours later, she wired me $25,000. And she said, I don't know why I'm doing this. I just feel like I have a knowing that I'm supposed to support your vision because I believe in it. So just a small example of what's possible when we actually do this work. And by this work, which I think in many communities, we can use that word so much that people just assume they know what it means. But the work is getting out of our own way.
Yeah.
At the core.
Yeah. When I was hearing that story in the book, it brought to mind for me, she was in surrender. And then it made me think about probably the misconceptions people have. I know that I definitely had around surrender.
It's very active. It's a very active thing.
It is not what the word sounds like. When I describe in many ways the biggest ways that I have grown over the last few years, I mean, really, I think from the last 2 years really has just been surrender. Mm-hmm. And it's not surrender of, okay, I'm giving up. I'm just going to let whatever happen. It is a very active experience. Can you describe that more, please? Because I want the listeners to really understand that surrender is a two-way street, which sounds odd, but it is. To get out of it, what you got out of it, to get out of it what we need out of it, our surrender experience, it's a very active experience.
Yeah, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to truly surrender. Surrender isn't like, okay, I'm going to just watch Netflix and, pretend like this problem that I have with my rent.
Like Jesus take the wheel.
Isn't happening. That's denial. That's quite different.
Yeah.
And so I think true surrender is, I don't know if you can really truly surrender if you don't have a relationship to that something greater than yourself.
Please say that again.
I don't know if you can truly surrender if you don't have an established relationship with something greater than yourself, because you asked earlier, well, what are we awakening to? So what are we surrendering to?
Yes.
We're surrendering to that which we cannot name. We're surrendering to the mystery, the intelligence of life, whatever you want to call it. Some people will call it God, some people will call it Jesus, some people will call it the universe. It's irrelevant what you call it. What's important is that you can feel the relationship with it. It's not just a concept. It's not just a word in the Bible or something your pastor told you. It's actually a felt experience of being connected to something, the thing that made you.
It's not like a letting go. It's almost like dropping in.
Yeah. It's a dropping in. Yeah. It's a plugging in.
Yes.
It's a plugging in.
Yes. Even better.
It's like plugging the umbilical cord of the greatest source of power that's available to you back in. And that is also the work. And, you can't just wait for those like rock bottom moments to all of a sudden, have that capacity. I mean, sometimes a rock bottom moment will create almost like an altered state where suddenly you have a felt experience of being connected to something bigger than you. That does happen, but I wouldn't rely on that so much.
Right, yeah.
I would say if you're proactive about creating that relationship in the first place and you're cultivating it every single day in the same way you would a relationship with your spouse. It's not like for a week you're just like, I'm going to just ignore my spouse. Like, I'm not going to say good morning. I'm not going to like offer her to make her a tea. I'm not going to.
Yeah, we don't recommend that here on Everforward Radio.
Just not going to engage.
But if you do, report back. I'd be very curious to know what happened. Yeah.
And then at the end of that week, you're like, by the way, I need you to help me with this thing. How is that going to go over? It's not going to work. So it's the same thing with that which cannot be named. It's really, truly this like, can I show up to it? Even if it's invisible, even if I don't know even what I'm showing up to, can I show up to my breath? Let's start there. Your breath can be the access point into that relationship. And it can be just that simple. And sometimes that's the simplest things are the hardest thing to do. Because we will be busy 24/7, scrolling on our phone, trying to figure solutions, reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts. But will you stop and will you plug in through the power of your breath for 10 minutes a day?
Yeah, and I'll say that level of trust or surrender really has to be tested through challenging times. And so it's easy to trust and be in surrender when I'm going to be in flow and I'm just kind of going and this great thing happened. But I think the real personal work happens, the growth happens when we surrender, when we trust, when your logical, rational mind would tell you otherwise. And,
yeah.
So.
And really also when you ask about surrender, a huge aspect of this work in order to connect and plug in the way we discussed is surrendering your ego or your identity's attachment to control. And that is pretty hardwired. So it takes a while.
Yeah, it's a practice.
That's a real practice.
To kind of wrap up this point, I'll say at 35, literally my 35th birthday, I was sharing with you all kind of the background of the show and my father. At 35, I decided to really, for the first time in many, many years, really turn and face and like dive headfirst into his death, and the trauma around all that. And just,
How long after his death was that?
this was 16 years.
Okay.
And so on my 35th birthday, I went in for my first ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which was even next level odd because my wife is a psychedelic nurse practitioner. So she was the one administering and, being in my presence and my journey and doing all this stuff. So it's like a whole nother uniqueness that is, your partner being with you, but also sending you on this journey for this full surrender work. And it was that word. It was like, I want to fully surrender to letting go and to moving past, and not that like I want to forget my father, but I want to move on with my life. And in order for me to do that, I recognize I need to surrender to that experience in a way that I have not yet been able to comprehend or to choose to apply. And that did that for me. And that's a pretty extreme example of, one way that we can go about that. But I don't think without that intention, I mean, who knows really, but I don't think without that intention for the next 3 sessions I had that I would have been able to advance so much. I would even be able to like hold this conversation in the way I am now with you guys. But it didn't mean just like letting go and the journey is just going to take you for a ride. Again, it was months of integration that came along with that surrender.
Yeah. Surrender is a very courageous act, and it's not passive, as we said before. And I think plant medicine specifically, some of the stronger ones, ayahuasca as an example, often can help, right? You can go in with an intention to surrender, and then they're really powerful in the sense that they can kind of circumvent your conscious mind and get into your conscious mind. I think Michael Singer talks about dreams in that way. Like dreams are your body's intelligent way of processing feelings that you are holding inside of you and releasing them. Because when you feel them, you release them. And your brain actually shrinks to 65% of its normal size. When you're sleeping, it's like a sponge, right? And so it's releasing all those toxins. And so these dreams have a way of bringing all this stuff to the surface so you can release it. And I think psychedelics can do that in a big way. And they can really, that's what you're at night when you're dreaming, your subconscious mind is taking over and saying, hey, we need to do some work. We need to feel some stuff.
It's my time to shine.
Release it, right? And so we can release it. And I think psychedelics are kind of like that on steroids in a way, right? Just a more intense expression of that. And they can be very useful to help you get to that place of surrender, get you over that line. And
it's never been the answer for me, at least, but it's a stepping stone to your point. Absolutely, yeah. It's a
tool.
very great tool. Absolutely,
it's a tool, yeah.
Damn, yeah. All right, let's not make it any more about me. But just again, so much. This is why I love kind of diving into people like yourself in this work, is because I think a lot of us in our path to becoming ourselves and to coming home to ourselves, personal development, whatever you want to call it, all the above, we kind of need to or want to feel like some kind of validation along the way. And I think there's this through line of the human experience that I think eventually all kind of learn the same things. A lot of this stuff we're talking about might be very familiar to someone listening or is going to be totally foreign to someone right now. But in 6 months, a year, you're going to be like, oh shit. Like, yeah, like it's all these kind of fundamental aspects. To kind of go to like when we're much better off after the work, when we're becoming more of our true authentic self or peeling back layers of this. Azrya, I think this was you in the book that said this, that again, just hit really hard for me because of like feedback that I get or feedback that I give people after I've kind of seen a lot of development and integration really. And it's as you discover a version of yourself that is deeply solid, but is never rigid. You emanate a warmth that makes other people's nervous systems unwind in your presence without you saying a single word. For me, I think like that would be like the best goal for everybody. Imagine you becoming you, so much so that you then just by being present allow other, like it gives me goosebumps. It just allows other people to do the same and allows this kind of system running in the background, the central nervous system of like, do I need to be on edge? Who are they? Like, do I need to kind of put on a facade, whatever? But just you walking into a room in a space, like it's just so obvious who you are and allows me to be who I am or who I want to be. That's kind of easier said than done though, right? But you know, can you expand on that, please?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, it's in some ways it's so simple, you know, and
it could just be that. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, because like, okay, if I actually just accept that at the core, I'm love, period. And that is the truest expression of my being. Then that is, without me saying a single word, a permission slip to everyone else to, through that mirroring, connect to the aspect of themselves that also knows that and also is maybe ready to remember that.
Because I think we all do know that in some way. It's just easier for some and more difficult for others.
Yeah, I think the spectrum of forgetting and remembering is really the spectrum that we're always oscillating in, you know? And there are some of us who have chosen to venture much further into the forgetting. And I would argue because there's a good reason for that. The forgetting isn't wrong or bad. It's just like Benjamin mentioned, the wisdom of lack. Well, forgetting the truest nature of ourselves and thinking that we are wrong or bad or somehow flawed, which I think many of us do. There's a reason that we're thinking that. There's a gift in that separation energy that we can harvest. It's just that we're not meant to create an identity around that. So can we give ourselves the opportunity to feel our shame, our unworthiness, our lack fully, and then say like, okay, I got the lesson. Like I'm good. I know what that feels like now. And in contrast to that feeling of fear or of unworthiness, when I do remember that I am love, when I have those glimpses of remembering, even if they're short-lived at first, the nectar of that feeling is going to be so much sweeter because I have the contrast of knowing what it feels like to forget.
You know both sides of the coin.
I got to
Absolutely,
really sit in both ends of that spectrum. And I think a lot of people experience glimpses or tastes of that, and especially in an expanded state of consciousness, like a ketamine journey or a plant medicine ayahuasca journey.
Hell, even just a really good breathwork
Great
class.
breathwork session, great meditation, yoga retreat, anything like that, where we have an opportunity to sort of let the noise fade away and we come back into connection with that, at the essence of our true nature. We're like, oh yeah, of course. This feels great. I'm just going to always feel this way now, right? That's the solution. I'm just going to always feel this way. And then we go back home or the journey ends.
And then we get real. And then we
get real.
off,
and then, our spouse tells us we didn't do the dishes right or whatever the thing is. And then trigger. And all that and then now all of a sudden, before we know it, we're back in I'm a failure. Like, well, how did I get back here? I was just over in this other place and it was so lovely. And so because I couldn't sustain it, therefore that must be more evidence that I'm somehow flawed or failed because I actually know better.
Yeah, it's,
right?
Like it's not real, it's not attainable, or I'm not worth it.
Yeah, and
it's not for me.
We can literally use our, our self-awareness to beat ourselves up even more, or we can choose a more compassionate approach and say, I'm just oscillating between the forgetting and the remembering, and the more that I give myself permission to forget, A, it'll be less painful. And B, the more fun I can have, dancing again, like instead of resisting or denying, I can like dance with it and be, okay, I'm forgetting right now. Or I have forgotten, like I'm in the deep, now I'm suddenly realizing I've forgotten. Wonderful. How can I build myself a bridge back to the remembering,
Wonderful.
Can you actually have that truly, attitude towards it? Because at the end of the day, it's all about your perspective in every moment. That's it.
I am lost as fuck. Everything is miserable and great. But truly, I mean, if you can, it's this like concept of delusional optimism in a way, but combined with, to your point, of awareness, especially if you've had any kind of experience in the past. It's like there's a knowing. I've been here before. I'm back again, or I'm just back in the unknowing, and I can like choose to get myself back out of this just like I did before.
Yeah. And one of the, I think, most underrated tools for this, like we all just laughed, right?
Yeah.
Is actually humor.
Oh yeah.
To be like, wow, could this be funny? You know, could this be so outrageously sad and
My
depressing?
life is such a joke.
Yeah, that
it's so
I'm actually,
miserable.
some part of me is tickled by this experience, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have in our curve that we take people through in our program. At the end, we have the highest expression of what she's talking about is when you can actually make love to that part of yourself. You can actually like love that part of yourself, and then that's where real true freedom lies. And then it just kind of takes the power away of the thing instead of being looping in your head. Yeah.
I think we're in synchronicity here because so much of what you guys are bringing up actually brings me to another point I had. We need only look with different eyes to realize that we are already there. Spoiler alert for everybody. This is the finale. And to see fear as a teacher, it is. And to truly love someone, like you're saying, B, means to embrace the full spectrum of who they really are. Fears, fucks, and farts and all. But I want to add something, and I would love to kind of hear you, your 2 cents. I think that plus ourselves, and maybe you all were talking about ourselves in that kind of love and embracement. But I think it's the more obvious route of, oh, that's how I need to love, or that's how I know I'm in love, or that's how I can have this great relationship with somebody else. But I also think we kind of forget ourselves in that process as well, too. Like we're talking about in the beginning, relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's important. We live this in this paradigm where there's this eternal desire to be happy, right? And that the goal is happiness. And that's a delusion, right? Like at the end of the day, part of the human experience is feeling pain, right? And being disappointed. And so I think that when you can learn to look at life that Azrya talked about it earlier about having that contrast, like without the pain, you wouldn't appreciate the pleasure. Like,
right. Yeah.
Like if you were orgasming every second of every day, like that would actually be a miserable experience. Right. And so the contrast is part of our human experience. And so I think that embracing that within yourself and within your partner is really the path
to self-love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimately.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're asking about, right? You're asking about self-love. Yeah.
So I think that that's at the core that's the practice of learning to be in appreciation for it all, and find the love, the passion in the mundane, right? Can you wash the dishes with devotion, right? In the same way that you would like polish your beautiful car, right? I think that's the game of life, because we get so attached to this finish line, right? Whether it's the thing that you want to accomplish, or the house that you want to buy, or the millions that you want to manifest. But that's not really where it's at. Where it's really at is in finding the pleasure in the mundane, and finding the passion in the pain, right? When you can find like gratitude in the deepest of grief. Like it's all goes back to what we talked about earlier of the paradox of life.
Yeah.
Because you've been on what I would say, having witnessed you and been with you every step along the way over the last 4 years, you've been really in a profound journey of understanding self-love. And you are someone who has had tremendous external material success in the world, and you've checked all those boxes. And from the outside looking in, you know, you got the hot chicks, you got the millions, and you got all the things. And there was this deep, deep peace inside that hadn't been addressed. And I feel like that might be valuable to share.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never thought about it in this context or through this lens. You know, when I think about my life and over the last 4 years of this massive, you know, growth that I've gone through, I don't think that I've been in the practice of self-love, right? I think that I've been in the practice of appreciating the challenges, of looking for the gift within the challenges of life.
Okay.
Of looking for the gifts for my growth within the challenges of life. And I think in being in that practice, I have, as a result of that, like learned to love myself or appreciate myself more. And
Why do you think that is? Sorry to interrupt. I'm just curious. What were kind of the aha moments there where you realized not only the tools and the gifts and these struggles maybe you were going through, the work that you were embarking upon, but also then like this is love, or an area where I wasn't showing myself self-love, or now I can take this gift and translate it into self-love?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think it was a moment. I think it's been a 1,000 moments, right? And I guess I've never thought about this, so it's a really interesting question. But what comes to me in this moment is that it hasn't come from from loving myself. It's come from appreciating life and its curriculum and finding the connection to the divine or the universe or spirit through my work with plant medicines that I didn't have before. And so it's been in loving and appreciating others that I've been able to love myself. And so really, and Azrya has been my biggest teacher, my guru in many ways. And I think in seeing, as we talked earlier, in seeing my reflection through her, I've been able to love myself more. In learning to receive her love, have I been able to love myself more? In witnessing how she loves others, I've been able to love more, as an example. And then also, as I've practiced giving more and love and
integrating
and everything and sharing my blessings with the world, I've been able to love myself through those acts. And so it hasn't been, I'm going to work on this aspect of myself.
Okay.
It's been more a byproduct of showing up in the world in a different way and looking at the universe in a different way and having a different relationship. I think at the core, learning to believe that the universe is benevolent, that the things that are happening are actually for me and serving me.
That you are loved by life.
That I am loved by life. Have I been able to learn to love myself more? And that's a practice and one that I have a long way to go on. But I'm certainly, evolved in the last 4 years dramatically.
What I'm kind of hearing in that is, I guess in a way, like getting away from ego. That was like a gift, maybe life, source, community, everybody around you was kind of unintentionally maybe giving you back as a way for, saying thank you for what I'm hearing. You weren't making it about you. You were pouring into others. You were kind of connecting with others. You were kind of tapping more in. So it wasn't like, how do I work on my self-love? But like you got self-love in return for the work you were giving. Yeah.
Internally, it wasn't like I was given anything in return. It wasn't like because I gave, I got something back. Right. It was more because I gave, I felt more full inside. Right. And it's
not like an if-then transactional thing, but it's kind of like what we get when we don't make it about us. When we give more, we get more, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's been, what an interesting way to reflect on it. I've never thought about it through that lens.
I guess it's so funny how, we talk about mirroring, right? And like our partner sees things in us that we can't see and then mirrors that back, and therefore we grow in that reflection. And Benjamin's certainly done that for me in so many ways.
I didn't like the mirroring this morning, by the way.
But
I got a question for that.
The way that I would have answered that question.
Oh, here we go. I didn't do it right.
No, you did it perfectly. You shared what was true for you, and I think because you haven't looked at it through this lens, it might be interesting to just like connect a couple dots, because my perception or experience is that your whole life you spent asking, how is it that I am so quote unquote successful and yet I don't feel it. I feel insecure. I feel unworthy. At the core of my being, I feel unworthy. Like, why is that? And I'm chasing all these shiny objects externally to temporarily fill that void, but it's like nothing's working. And that's kind of the conversation that we started our relationship with regarding your personal work. And you've really been excavating, because he went to all the therapists and he read the personal development books, and he really was very self-aware, but there was this piece that just hadn't been unearthed. And through the work with plant medicine and specifically going to Peru, Benjamin made contact with really the little boy in him.
Oh, wow.
And specifically the little boy that couldn't read, because Benjamin had a severe learning disability in school that he had never seen as like...
Dyslexic, right?
Dyslexic,
Yeah.
ADHD, probably all the things that they didn't have language for back then, you know?
Yeah.
And watching you embrace that little boy that you had rejected and resisted for so long, you had spent so much life force energy trying to get rid of him. To see you like, meet him, feel him, allow him to exist, and then embrace him ultimately, to me is the ultimate expression of a journey of self-love.
Yeah, Astrid, one of our facilitator in our last retreat, asked the group a question, what is your superpower? And I've never thought about that. And I thought it was a very interesting question. And where I landed was I felt that was my superpower was my ability to, despite feeling deeply insecure my entire life and having that scared little boy like in me, to like pick him up, throw him over my shoulder and do pretty impressive things considering how I started life, in that sense. Yeah, so that resonated. Thank you for that reflection.
That's it, right? Again, so much of what you all are talking about. And again, also just like beautiful to kind of see you guys have a little moment there, talk to each other. That was really cool. Thank you for kind of doing that here with us, us people in the future. Again, yes, like that hit so hard for me because I think one of the best realizations I've had in becoming Chase and understanding who he is and what he wants and all the things they're going to continue to want, is I don't need to fight as much getting rid of all these old versions of myself. And the harder I have tried to keep past versions in the past or to completely do the opposite so that I never revisit that version of Chase again, that was the biggest disservice I was doing to myself.
Yeah.
It's facing them, acknowledging them, sitting with them, kind of call it, if you're a Dexter fan, like my dark passenger. We've all got these dark passengers, and it's like, we're never going to get rid of it, him, her, them, whatever. They're all with us. Every version of myself that I love, every version of myself that I have hated or disliked is still right here, right now, today. Mm-hmm. And if we can just somehow work on coming to peace with that and loving all of those versions, like that is the best growth. That is the most becoming I have ever experienced.
Yeah. That's another way to define integration.
Yes.
You're literally
absolutely
integrating all these fragmented aspects of yourself that you didn't have the tools to even be aware of. And now you can piece by piece bring them into wholeness, not by rejecting them, but by allowing them and loving them and seeing the ways in which they served you.
And feeling them,
And continue to serve too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other question I want to ask before I get to my final question with you all. This has just been so great. Thank you again for your time and your work. As a couple, as a married couple, as business partners, as creators, as just individuals that are so clearly on your individual paths, but also working together, what prompts do you have? What kind of scenarios do you have maybe where you can recognize something in the other person as like, hey, maybe you're working on something much more difficult right now and it's kind of spilling over into my world a little bit? Because I think this is important for us to grasp, especially if we're in relationships with another person, to cue the other person, to prompt the other person of like, hey, you're going through something. I want you to go through it, but it's kind of spilling over in my world in a way that doesn't serve me or us. I know it might be kind of situational dependent, but just that general concept. Like, how can we get better at that?
Is it a question around boundaries?
Perhaps, or even just communication. What are ways to communicate or not communicate? How can we kind of dance? I don't want to dance around it, but with it, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It came up at one point in our relationship where when we met, I went into a pretty deep journey I was going through, as you read in the book, like a massive lawsuit, and it really had me in kind of a dark place. And I was in a deep process for, I would say, 18 months and sitting with a lot of plant medicines, and Azrya was a coach for me through a lot of that. And at one point, I think she was like, hey, listen, I think that maybe it's time for you to get a coach that's not me. And because it's feeling like a bit much. And so I think setting boundaries is important. I think,
And introducing a little space.
yeah. I think the thing with boundaries is just like anything. Where's the intention coming from? If the boundary's coming from a true place of love, then there can be really healthy boundaries. And sometimes people set boundaries coming from a place of fear and insecurity, or
Bringing boundaries from past experiences that
and
might
so
not apply.
they can be distorted. And so boundaries aren't necessarily inherently good or bad. I think that, but I think there's a time and place, and I do think that not everything that you're going through needs to be processed with your partner. And I think a lot of times people think that that's the case. And I think through, maturity and discernment, I think having the awareness to know when to bring it forward. We're blessed in that we have a dynamic where we can talk about anything, and we've never been in a fight in 4 years, which is really rare, because when something comes up, and we are triggered, we look within and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? What's going on? And there's so much love and respect and appreciation for the other that we don't get into the blaming game, and pointing fingers.
Yeah.
And so it's a little different for us. And Azrya's, been a coach for, a decade. And it also makes it's a little different. So I'm not sure it's the best context for the listeners. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say, because I have been someone who like literally professionally holds space for people's process, it was very organic and natural for me when I met him. Even though I was in love with him and I saw his power and his beauty, I also saw the work he had to do. It was very clear to me.
Yeah.
And he was very aware of it too. Maybe not as clearly aware of like what it was actually going to take. I think I remember having a moment early on, like maybe within the first week of meeting, where we were sitting on the couch and we were talking, and I was asking him some questions, and I remember thinking to myself, like, this dude has no clue what he's signing up for. Like, this dude has no idea. Like, shit's gonna get real, and it's gonna get real fast. And I'm like, yeah, so okay, you would like to start working with ayahuasca some more? Okay, cool. And I'm just like, the oracle in me is like seeing the coming attractions, and I'm like, okay, here we go. So, and it really was. It was a really intense time. And it was, I would say in some ways, it really initiated me to be able to hold way more than I'd ever had to hold before. Like just the bigness of his life and his challenges, not just, on a personal level, but also like the lawsuit, the financial challenges, the lawyers, like there was a lot to kind of clean up energetically and work with. And so I had been calling in, like, part of my mission in this life is to work with people who are leaders. And at that time, I hadn't yet had an opportunity to do that really with like well-established, CEOs or people who are like in that stage of life.
So did you kind of view this as maybe
training,
an opportunity for this now?
Yeah, it was training for sure.
Calling,
Yeah, and so it wasn't like unexpected. It was like, okay, I've been calling this in. I know this has been coming. I didn't expect it to be with someone that I was in a romantic relationship with, which adds layers of complexity, but also in some ways gives you a lot of benefit because you are so intimately connected to that person and you're so allowed into their process that you're able to then also see so much more that in one coaching session per week, you might never get to see, right?
What a powerfully unique position. Absolutely.
Super powerful and unique. And so I kind of did that for as long as it felt true. And then as Benjamin mentioned, there was a moment where it no longer felt like it was really nourishing. And it also felt like I'd kind of played I had done my part. And then the tables turned. And then I went into my process. And that was really unexpected because up until that point, I had maybe a little arrogantly been in this assumption of like, well, I've done my work, like I'm good. And in truth, I was walking through life with like a lot of ease and a lot of knowing and a lot of feeling like I've got the tools and I can connect when I need to. And if I have shit come up, I can process it. And then I just got like sideswiped by curriculum that, was not expected. And you read about it in the book, but this whole like child conversation, having a child, not having a child, like what that brought up for me in terms of my own unprocessed childhood stuff. I'd never been able to access that before. And it was really like it hijacked my nervous system in a way that was unexpected and challenging. And we had a conversation where I said, I've been holding space for you for a while now. And now I'm really feeling like I'm going to need you to hold space for me. So coming back to your question about how do we communicate that, first, I really had to understand that I was in a place where I actually didn't know what was happening exactly. And what was tricky about it is that particular curriculum was also very connected to us and our relationship. So my inclination was to kind of go off on my own and process it on my own, using my tools, using my support systems, and kind of try and keep him out of it. But simultaneously, the deeper layer of intimacy was actually to let him see me in that and to be truly vulnerable in it. I don't know what's happening right now, and I actually don't know if we're going to make it through this.
Was that maybe a layer of protection you thought you had? I'm doing this to protect him?
For sure.
It was a difference between protection and intimacy.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes really challenging to know the difference because it can be really hard to discern. I think sometimes we over process with our partner. Sometimes we're like, every little thing, I'm going to go to my partner, I'm going to process it. And
that's why I got a partner, right?
Yeah. That's also not necessarily what the relationship.
Take all my words on it.
Yeah. I'll send you a bill at some point.
My wife and I joke all the time when things get real like this. At the end, all right, that was a billable hour.
Yeah.
That was a billable hour. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm no longer your wife. You're.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think that discernment is tricky, and I really sat in it for a while before I brought it forward because I knew bringing it forward was also going to be intense for him to process. And so, but there came a point, a tipping point, where I was like, I literally cannot withhold my process anymore. It's not serving because now I'm actually just.
It's a totally different realization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think before maybe just sort of knee-jerk reaction, unconsciously processing just because that's the default, I would recommend stopping, using your personal tools, your personal practice as a way to really discern and ask, how much does this serve? How much can I really work through this on my own? And how much do I actually need to invite my partner into this with me? And then hopefully your partner is also willing to do their own work. And if they do get triggered by your process, acknowledge that that's happening and work with that. And when you have two people who are committed to that, then your growth is exponential.
Yeah. That's something May and I have talked about quite a bit. She, for a while, actually for a couple of years, one episode a month, she would come on with me and we would do a relationship health episode. And one of the things we drove home a lot, and we even talk about with a lot of other friends and, couples, that doesn't really jive with a lot of other people, is that your partner, it's this realization that we think we have this assumption that our partner is going to be our everything. And that's just simply, we believe that's just simply not true. They're going to be a lot of things for you. They're going to be a rock. They're going to be a sounding board. They're going to be a healthy boundary. They're going to be a resource. They're going to be a billable hour, a lot of different things. But we're really doing us. We believe we're doing us and the relationship and the other person as an individual probably the biggest disservice by putting that responsibility and assumption that whatever I'm going through, you're always going to have an answer or be the resource for me.
Yeah.
That's just not fair and it's not real.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to know is guaranteed is that your partner's likely to be your biggest source of curriculum or trigger. And so, I think that's the one thing you can kind of count on is that your partner is going to be that.
That's how you know you got a good one, I think.
Yeah.
Well, again, Azrya, this was amazing. I really enjoyed the book. I'm excited to go actually read the hard copy now and do all my due diligence. But listening to you all kind of share your individual life journey and becoming you and then becoming B and Azrya was really, really personally validating and exciting and interesting and intriguing. And there are a lot of other things in the book that we didn't touch on, but I got to leave something for you guys out there at home. So my last question, to bring it all home to the theme of living a life ever forward. Everything we've been talking about, I want to be a resource, to be a tool for the listener to kind of take, to mull over, hopefully to apply and to integrate into their life, to take a step forward, to move forward in their life. But when you all hear those words, what do they mean to you? How do you live a life ever forward?
We have this question that we really like that in fact, I just shared it yesterday with my forum. But I think it's a guiding philosophy for life. And we ask ourselves it often. And it's beyond my preference, beyond our preference. What would love choose? And so when we have difficult decisions, when we have a crossroads, when we want to just reflect or contemplate why we're doing something and if it's the right thing to do, we ask ourselves that question, beyond our preference, what would love choose? And the greater love, whatever you believe in, God, the benevolent universe, spirit, but what would that be? And sometimes it's, sometimes the greater love would want you to be selfish and go get a massage and self-care day, right? And sometimes it would be like, no, go be of service in some way. And so I think that's at least for me, that's what comes up as my way of guiding myself ever forward, is because if I'm answering that question, at least asking the question, like I think the practice is asking the question and the answer is almost irrelevant, but if you're constantly asking, and so for me, that is my way of moving in forward in the right direction.
Moving forward out of love, can't go wrong. Yeah, or just get yourself one of these door covers behind me, right? Yeah.
Ruben.
Shout out Ruben. Azrya?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the consistency with which I choose to plug back in to my knowing. That's how I move ever forward. And it's not just once a day in my daily practice. Yeah. It's like, it's countless times a day where I notice I'm getting caught up. I'm getting, even in a positive way, sometimes just really entangled in the future.
Right.
Right.
That's a thing too.
And I'm super visionary and I love thinking about all the possibilities. And that's for sure a superpower of mine. And the shadow side of that is it can pull me out of what's right here, right now. And so how many times can I plug back in through the present moment to allow what is to be exactly what is supposed to be? How can I anchor myself in my body through my breath with that intention? To me, that's how I move ever forward.
Two amazing answers. I always say there's never a right or a wrong answer, just personal interpretation. So thank you. This is really just my selfish way of taking how I choose to live my life and imposing it on other people that also embody some way that I find value in, education, information, and then come together to kind of share it out with the world. So you guys definitely want to check out the book, Becoming Everything You Didn't Know You Wanted. Another great kind of just subtitle that I took away. So many little notes I didn't even get to, but again, check out the book. It'll be listed down in the show notes, the video notes for you guys. And where can they go right now to connect with you the most?
Yeah, the best way to connect with us is our Instagram, which is Becoming with a Q.
With a Q, yeah.
And
which I didn't. I'm sorry, did I miss that? I feel like, where did the Q come from?
Oh, it's in the book. Yeah,
I'm having a total brain fart right now. I can't remember.
The Q has multiple meanings. The main one, since we're at the end of the episode, I'll just share the main one. It really represents questions, essential questions.
Okay, yeah.
So a lot of, a lot of the path of becoming is defined by asking the essential questions and then like actually listening for the answer.
All the paradoxes we were talking about.
Yeah. So
also, Michelle Obama had a book called Becoming, and so we kind of had to.
And also,
and change the SEO.
And also, our last name is Bequer with a Q.
There we go.
BEQ.
Yeah.
So it just kind of all made sense.
Perfect.
You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on our website. If you want the book, the ebook version, the PDF, we have a special page that's not public. You could go to becomingwithaQ.me/ebook.
Okay.
And then you can access it right there for under $5. And then we have some really incredible programs. Right now, the book has been front and center, obviously, and our stories have been instrumental in the book, and so therefore that's been a big part of like the way in which Becoming is interfacing with the world. But really, Becoming is much bigger than us and the book. Becoming is not a personal brand. It's actually a platform that is devoted to empowering people to unlock the truth of who they are. And we do that by facilitating really transformational processes through our programs. So we have online programs. We also are building a retreat center facility where we'll have more in-person offerings. And our upcoming program launches April 15th. It's the Becoming Allies program.
Well, thank you guys again so much.